Ravencrest Manor, a name whispered on the wind, a grand estate shrouded in shadow and secrets. Once it pulsed with life. Laughter echoed through its halls. Music drifted from its windows. Love, a tangible presence, filled every room. At the heart of this life were Amelia and Charles Moreau. He, a titan of industry, his mind as sharp as the cut of his suits. Yet it was his heart that truly captivated. For it belonged completely to Amelia. She was the melody to his rhythm, a pianist whose very being was woven from music. Their love was the stuff of legends, a bond that transcended the ordinary, leaving its mark on every brick, every stone of Ravencrest. Fate, it is said, has a way of intervening. A stormy evening, the city awash in a torrent of rain. Young Amelia, her arms filled with precious sheet music, caught in the deluge. The ink bled, her dreams dissolving with each drop. Then a hand, strong, steady, halting the lost Charles. His voice, a low murmur, broke through the storm, a tragedy, or perhaps a new beginning. He saw beyond the rain-soaked pages into the depths of her talent. That night, in a dimly lit cafe, as Amelia's fingers coaxed life back into the damaged music, something bloomed. Not just the melody, but a connection, instant and undeniable. Years later, the echoes of their love linger. In the musty silence of the attic, beneath layers of dust and time, lies a wooden chest. A woman, her hand trembling, lifts the heavy lid. Inside, a single yellowed letter. The ink is faded, the handwriting urgent, I'm afraid. It begins, words penned in desperation, a desperate plea from a soul in torment. The woman reads on, each word sending a fresh wave of cold through her veins. The letter speaks of fear, of a darkness that seeped into Ravencrest, twisting the love that once filled its rooms. It tells of a knock. Every night at 3:33 a.m., the sound echoing through the once joyous halls, the woman clutches the letter, her heart pounding in her chest. From somewhere below, the faint sound of a piano drifts up through the floorboards. The melody, both beautiful and haunting, seems to whisper of a love that not even death could silence. A love that lingers still, entwined with the shadows that now claim Ravencrest as their own. The rain was relentless. Sheets of water cascaded from the heavens, turning the cobblestone streets into raging rivers. Gaslights flickered, casting an eerie orange glow that only accentuated the shadows dancing in the downpour. Amelia clutched her precious sheet music tighter, as if trying to will it safe from the storm. Each gust of wind threatened to rip the paper from her grasp, each raindrop blurring the carefully penned notes. It had been a foolish errand, venturing out in such weather, but her heart had been set on reaching the music shop before it closed. Now, soaked to the bone and with her precious cargo in danger, she cursed her impulsiveness. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the shadows, intercepting a particularly vicious gust that threatened to tear the music free. Amelia whirled around, startled to find herself face to face with a man unlike any she'd ever encountered. He was tall, his silhouette framed against the flickering gaslight, his features shadowed and indistinct. Yet even in that fleeting glimpse, Amelia was struck by the intensity of his gaze. His eyes, a deep, unsettling blue, seemed to see right through her. "A tragedy," he murmured, his voice low and surprisingly melodic, holding the salvaged sheet music out to her, "but perhaps it's just waiting for a new beginning." Amelia found herself speechless, mesmerized by the stranger's words and the strange comfort they offered. His touch, when he handed back her music, sent a jolt through her, an unexpected warmth that spread through her rain-chilled body. He introduced himself as Charles, his voice barely audible above the howling wind. Sensing her hesitation, he gestured towards a nearby cafe, its windows glowing invitingly in the gloom. "Allow me to offer you some refuge from the storm," he said, a slight smile playing on his lips and perhaps a chance to breathe life back into these drowned melodies. The cafe was small, cozy, a haven from the tempest raging outside. The air was thick with the aroma of coffee and baking bread, a stark contrast to the damp chill that clung to Amelia's clothes. She watched, captivated, as Charles negotiated with the owner, securing a quiet corner and a cup of steaming hot chocolate. As she sipped the sweet, rich drink, her gaze fell upon an old, somewhat battered piano tucked away in a corner. It was clear the instrument had seen better days, but there was a certain charm to its worn keys and faded wood. Meeting Charles's gaze across the table, she saw an unspoken question in his eyes. It was then, with a nervous flutter in her chest, that she knew she had to play. This chance encounter, this storm that had brought them together, felt strangely like destiny. And what better way to defy the chaos outside than with the language of music? As Amelia's fingers danced across the worn keys, the cafe seemed to fade away. The storm outside, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversation, all silenced by the sheer beauty of the melody that flowed from her fingertips. It was a waltz, bittersweet and yearning, a reflection of the storm that raged both outside and within her soul. She played with an intensity that belied her youthful appearance, her passion igniting a fire in the dimly lit cafe. Charles watched, his gaze never leaving her for a moment. He sat still as a statue, yet Amelia could feel the intensity of his attention, a tangible presence that both thrilled and unnerved her. The final note faded, leaving behind a silence that felt both profound and expectant. Amelia dared to glance at Charles, her heart pounding in her chest. His expression when their eyes met was unreadable, yet she sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a connection forged in the shared language of music. He rose from his seat and approached her, his movements fluid and graceful. Taking her hand in his, he raised it to his lips, his touch sending shivers down her spine. "You play like an angel, Miss Moreau," he murmured, his voice low and husky. "But I believe you already know that." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of stolen moments and shared dreams. Charles, despite his imposing presence and reputation as a shrewd businessman, proved to be a surprisingly tender and attentive suitor. He showered Amelia with gifts, flowers, books of poetry, sheet music that made her heart sing. Their courtship was the talk of the city, a source of both envy and admiration. Yet, amidst the joy and excitement, Amelia couldn't shake off a growing unease. It was as if a shadow had fallen over their happiness, a premonition of darkness to come. It began subtly, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, a whisper of her name when no one was around, a cold breeze that seemed to emanate from within Ravencrest itself. One evening, as Amelia dressed for dinner, she noticed Charles standing before the ornate mirror in their bedroom. He stood perfectly still, his back to her, his gaze fixed on his reflection. "Charles?" she called softly, approaching him. "Is everything all right?" He didn't respond. He didn't even seem to register her presence. It was as if he were trapped in a trance, his entire being consumed by whatever he saw reflected in the glass. A shiver of apprehension ran down Amelia's spine. There was something deeply unsettling about his stillness, about the way the shadows seemed to cling to him in the dimly lit room. "Charles," she repeated, her voice trembling slightly, "please tell me what's wrong." He turned then slowly, as if reluctant to break free from the mirror's hold. His face, normally so full of life, was pale and drawn, his eyes wide with a look of dawning horror. "Amelia," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "I saw something terrible." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. The fear in Charles's eyes, so raw and unmasked, sent a chill down her spine. It was a stark contrast to his usual demeanor, the unshakable confidence now replaced by a vulnerability that both frightened and compelled her. "What was it, Charles?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What did you see?" He hesitated, his gaze darting around the room as if searching for an escape from some unseen pursuer. The silence stretched, each tick of the grandfather clock in the corner amplifying the growing tension. "It was a reflection," he finally said, his voice strained. but not my own. Amelia's mind raced, trying to make sense of his words. A reflection that wasn't his own? What could it mean? Before she could question him further, a sudden sound pierced the silence. A knock, sharp and insistent, echoed from the direction of the bedroom door. Charles stiffened, his gaze snapping to the door. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, his hand instinctively reaching out to grip Amelia's arm. She nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The knock, coming at this late hour in this house that suddenly felt more like a prison than a sanctuary, sent a wave of unease washing over her. They approached the door cautiously, Charles leading the way, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Amelia held her breath, every nerve ending on high alert. The knock came again, louder this time, demanding entrance. With a deep breath, Charles threw open the door. The hallway beyond was empty, illuminated only by the flickering gaslights that cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. There was no sign of anyone, no explanation for the insistent knocking. A chill wind seemed to sweep through the house, extinguishing the candle Charles held, plunging them into darkness. Amelia gasped, her hand instinctively reaching out to steady herself. "There's no one there," she whispered, her voice trembling. Charles didn't reply. He stood frozen, his gaze fixed on something beyond Amelia's field of vision. She turned slowly, following his gaze, but saw nothing but the empty hallway. "Charles?" she said, her voice edged with panic. "What is it?" He finally turned back to her, his expression a mixture of fear and grim determination. "It seems," he said, his voice low and steady, "we have an uninvited guest." He took her hand in his grip strong and reassuring. In that moment, despite the fear that pulsed through her veins, Amelia felt a surge of love for this man, this rock in the storm that had suddenly engulfed their lives. Whatever darkness lurked in the shadows of Ravencrest, she knew they would face it together. Their love, she realized, was their shield, their sanctuary in a world that had grown increasingly menacing. The knocking returned every night. At precisely 3:33 a.m., the sound would rip through the silence of Ravencrest Manor, each rap on the door like a hammer blow to their sanity. Charles had the servants check every room, every nook and cranny of the vast estate, but there was never anyone there. Amelia felt the fear gnawing at her, a constant undercurrent to their once idyllic existence. She tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, to lose herself in her music, but the fear was always there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to pounce. Charles too seemed to be changing. He grew withdrawn, his eyes haunted by a secret he refused to share. He would spend hours staring into the ornate mirror in their bedroom, as if searching for answers in its depths. One night, Amelia awoke to the sound of music drifting from downstairs. It was a piano, playing a haunting melody she didn't recognize. Charles, she noticed, was still asleep beside her, his breathing deep and even. Curiosity, stronger than her fear, drew her from the warmth of the bed. She crept down the grand staircase, each step echoing in the stillness, her bare feet cold against the marble floor. The music seemed to be coming from the drawing room. As she approached, the melody grew louder, more insistent, the notes weaving a tapestry of both beauty and dread. Section 3, Sealed Fates. She paused at the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was bathed in moonlight, the shadows dancing in a macabre waltz as the unseen pianist played on. And then she saw him, Charles. He was seated at the piano, his back to her, his fingers moving effortlessly over the keys. But it wasn't the Charles she knew. His posture was rigid, his movements mechanical, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. She tried to speak, to call out his name, but her voice died in her throat. A wave of cold washed over her, a premonition of something terrible, something inevitable. Section 4. Echoes in the silence. The music stopped abruptly, as if the very air had been sucked out of the room, leaving an eerie void in its wake. Silence descended once more upon Ravencrest Manor, heavier and more oppressive than before. The ancient walls seemed to close in, the shadows lengthening and deepening as if the house itself was holding its breath. Charles turned slowly, his movements stiff and deliberate, his eyes fixed on Amelia with a chilling intensity. It was as if he was seeing her for the first time, or perhaps seeing something beyond her, something only he could perceive. His face, normally so full of life, was now a mask of something else, something cold and alien. The warmth that once defined his features had been replaced by an unsettling stillness, a void that seemed to swallow the light around him. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear, couldn't comprehend. It was as if he was speaking from another realm, his voice lost in the chasm that now separated them. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The room returned to its oppressive silence, the air thick with unspoken dread. The light faded from his eyes, leaving behind a hollow shell. The vibrant man she once knew was gone, replaced by an empty vessel. He slumped forward, his body collapsing onto the piano keys, the discordant notes echoing through the silent house like a final mournful cry. The sound lingered, haunting the air long after the keys had stilled. Amelia stood frozen, paralyzed by the horror of what she had witnessed. Her mind struggled to process the reality before her, the man she loved reduced to a lifeless form, the love of her life, the man who had been her rock, her sanctuary, was gone. The grief that welled up inside her was almost too much to bear, a tidal wave of sorrow that threatened to drown her. And in his place stood something else, something twisted and malevolent, something that mirrored her deepest fears. It was a presence that seemed to mock her pain, feeding off her despair. She knew then, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that whatever darkness had claimed Charles would not rest until it had claimed her too. The realization was a cold, unyielding truth that settled deep within her, a shadow that would haunt her every step. Section 1. A letter from beyond. The woman in the attic lowered Amelia's letter, her hand trembling. She had found it hidden in an old chest, buried beneath layers of forgotten memories and dust. The attic, filled with relics of the past, seemed to hold its breath as she read. The words, penned in a moment of desperation, painted a chilling portrait of a love consumed by darkness. Each sentence was a cry for help, a plea that had gone unanswered for decades. Amelia's fear, her certainty that something evil had invaded their lives, resonated through the years, as palpable as the dust motes dancing in the weak sunlight filtering through the attic window. The air was thick with the weight of her words, each one a testament to her terror. She thought of Amelia alone in her fear, desperately trying to warn anyone who might listen. The isolation, the dread, it all felt so real, as if Amelia's spirit was still trapped in the house, waiting for someone to understand her plight. The thought of the young bride hiding the letter, her heart heavy with a premonition of doom, sent a shiver down the woman's spine. She could almost see Amelia, her face pale with fear, her hands shaking as she tucked the letter away, hoping it would be found by someone who could help. A floorboard creaked beneath her feet and she jumped, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound echoed through the silent attic, a stark reminder of the house's age and the secrets it held. The house was never truly silent. Even in its stillness, it seemed to whisper of the past, of the lives that had been lived within its walls and the tragedies that had unfolded. Whispers seemed to emanate from the very walls, and the air was thick with a palpable sense of unseen eyes, watching her every move. It was as if the house itself was alive, aware of her presence and intent on revealing its secrets. She had always been drawn to Ravencrest, to its tragic history and the enduring mystery of Amelia and Charles. The mansion, with its grand facade and dark past, had always seemed to call to her, beckoning her to uncover its stories. But now, standing in the heart of their grief, she felt a primal urge to flee, to escape the suffocating presence that clung to the house like a shroud. The weight of the past was overwhelming, and she wondered if she had the strength to uncover the truth, or if she would become just another ghost in Ravencrest's haunted history. Section 2. Love's Requiem. In the heart of Ravencrest Manor, where shadows whispered secrets and the air was thick with the weight of forgotten memories, a tale of love and loss unfolded. This was no ordinary love story, but one that transcended the boundaries of life and death, echoing through the corridors of time. But even as the urge to flee battled with her curiosity, another sound reached her ears. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, a haunting melody that tugged at the edges of her memory. It was faint at first, a whisper of music carried on the breeze. The notes were delicate, almost fragile, as if they might shatter under the weight of the silence that surrounded them. The melody, both beautiful and haunting, seemed to emanate from the very walls of the manor. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing out the sorrowful tune that filled the air with a sense of longing and despair. It was the same melody Amelia had described in her letter, the one Charles had played in the throes of his possession. The notes, once a testament to their love, now echoed with a chilling sorrow, a lament for a love lost to forces beyond comprehension. The notes, once a testament to their love, now echoed with a chilling sorrow, a lament for a love lost to forces beyond comprehension. Each keystruck seemed to resonate with the pain of a heart torn asunder, a love story that had ended in tragedy. The woman felt a cold hand grip her heart. It was as if the very essence of the manor was reaching out to her, pulling her into its dark embrace. The music was growing louder, more insistent, drawing her down the stairs, deeper into the heart of Ravencrest. Each step she took seemed to echo with the weight of the past, the memories of those who had walked these halls before her. She knew she should turn back, escape while she still could, but the melody, like a siren's call, beckoned her forward, promising both answers and a terror she couldn't even begin to comprehend. But the melody, like a siren's call, beckoned her forward, promising both answers and a terror she couldn't even begin to comprehend. The light ahead seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the music, drawing her ever closer. As the final notes faded into silence, the woman stood before the grand piano in the drawing room. The air hung heavy with anticipation, the unseen eyes watching, waiting. The air hung heavy with anticipation, the unseen eyes watching, waiting. She could feel their presence, the weight of their gaze pressing down on her, and then, soft as a breath, she heard it. A voice, barely more than a whisper, yet filled with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. Even in the next life, a voice whispered, close to her ear, sending shivers down her spine, "I will find you." The words were a promise, a threat and a plea all at once. The woman gasped, spinning around to face the source of the voice. Her heart pounded in her chest, the fear gripping her like a vice, but there was no one there, only the shadows, deeper now, and the lingering echo of a love that refused to die, even in the face of unspeakable horror. Only the shadows, deeper now, and the lingering echo of a love that refused to die, even in the face of unspeakable horror. The memories of a time long past, of a love that had been both beautiful and tragic, filled the room. And as the grandfather clock in the hallway chimed the hour, 3:33 a.m., the knocking began again. It was a sound that seemed to come from the very heart of the manor, a reminder that the past was never truly gone, but always waiting, just out of sight.